So you just took that one piece out. It was there. This is silver skin. We'll take that off. We'll just rest the knife right on it. Take it off. I'm not going to trim off all the little pieces of meat, but like I said, you can if you want. If I'm trimming up an expensive piece of meat, I'll trim all that off and save it and use it for chili. I'll grind it up as a rough grind for chili and put it in the freezer. When I have enough of it, I'll make homemade hamburger and make chili out of it, because I don't want to waste expensive cuts of meat like that. So that little bit that's on there, if you don't like it, take it off. Gone. If it bothers you. We got a little bit, look here, we got a little bit of tiny bit of fat here. Take off the meat part, trim off the fat part, throw it away if you don't like that. Take that off. It won't hurt anything, it's going to cook down anyway. And remember, any of this fat that you leave on anyway is going to cook to the surface of the, because you're basically going to simmer a stew out of this. And so it's all going to cook down and rise to the top over the course of an hour of simmering anyway. But if you don't want it in there, take it off. My family hates fat, so I always take it off. Anything I cook is almost always trimmed down to nothing, so there's hardly any fat like that. I'll take it all off. Chicken, beef, doesn't matter, pork, because they just hate it. There's a little more silver skin here. And silver skin is not fat, but it's really tough to chew through. So it's really hard to chew through. So whenever you see silver skin, real thin, just take it off. Okay, and as you can see, I just trimmed up both of those rows real fast, and all I have left is lean meat now. And I'm gonna take these little pieces that I took off. I just want bite-sized pieces, so whether I'm doing strips or cubes, cut them in half, set those off, those are ready to go. Now with these, like I told you before, it's already dead, you can't hurt it. You want bite-sized pieces, whether you're doing strips or cubes, it doesn't matter. So I just cut those long ways like that. And it doesn't matter if I cut with the grain or against the grain, because I'm going to take them. If I'm doing strips, what I'm going to do is just do long strips like this. Tip of the knife, pull it down, pull it down, pull it down. Then I have strips, and I could go a long way now. Take it, and then do long strips, and then just cut them to whatever length I want. Now I have strips. In this case, I prefer stroganoff in cubes. So now I'm just going to take those same strips that I just cut them into cubes. This is why I prefer a cleaver while I'm doing this, by the way, because it's heavy enough to where I can cut these strips, and then when I go to do the cubes, I don't have to put any effort in. I just rock it, and it cuts the cubes for me. So that's why I prefer cleaver. You just got to keep your hands out of the way, that's all. And as you can see, I'm letting it do all the work. Rock it. And so all I'm doing is taking these pieces and cutting them into strips that will eventually become cubes. Again, really simple. Easy to do. Get them to where they're uniform. I'm letting the cleaver do all the work. If it's too fat, run another piece down it. Run another piece down it. Like that, put them all together. Really easy to do. And if while you're doing this, you find a piece that's got a little piece of fat in it like this did, pull it out, trim that piece of fat off you go. And you can see this is all, now this, by the way, if you want to buy this in the store, they'll sell you stew meat like this that's already cut like this. The problem is it's coming from trimmings that the butcher's doing in the shop there through the course of the day. It could be coming from any cut of meat. And so they're taking the scraps and the trimmings and they're saving it. And when they have a pile of it there, they cut it up into cubes like this. They put it into a tray and they call it stew meat and sell it for you for twice the amount that you're getting here. So it could be coming from a variety of cuts. On top of that, if you ever look at that stew meat, a lot of the times you'll see that it's got a lot of gristle and it's got a lot of fat in it. So you just took a cheap, inexpensive cut of lean meat like this that's on sale. You created your own that you can control the size of the meat and you know what's going into it, and you know that it's all, in this case, cross rib roast, and there is no fat, there is no gristle, because you just trimmed it up, so you know exactly what's going into your stroganoff, and you're doing it for half the price of the leftovers that they're cutting up and calling stew meat and trying to sell you for $8 a pound. So think about that too. So there, I'm finished with this. So now that I've got all that done, look at that. Oh, there's a little tiny piece right there. See it? I saw it, so I'll pull that out. Just trim that off and save that little piece of meat. A little bit there. I'll just go ahead and do that one too. But I don't see it anywhere else, and whatever's left in here is going to cook off anyway. So I'll clean all that is. All right, now over here I got my big old pan. I don't need a for this. I'm just going to turn this on high right now and let the pan get hot. Okay? Leave that alone. Over here, I'm going to take my salt. This is kosher salt. You can use kosher, you can use table salt, you can use, I prefer to use good salt for my meats. So I'm just going to take some and sprinkle it on there. You could use sea salt for this if you want. Use a good salt for your meats before you cook them. This is some fresh ground pepper. I keep it in the bowl. I'm just going to dust this with some pepper as well. And then I'm going to just mix this up on the board to coat all the meat before the next step, which is really simple. And then remember that beer. See, I always get going and I forget I got a beer open. So mix this up on the board. Pick up all that seasoning. Why waste it? Here, I have about 1.5 scoops of flour. I can't tell you how much is in there. It's not even a cup. I threw it in a bowl. You can use any size bowl you want. Use a wide bowl so that you don't get flour everywhere. And just like Emerald says, I don't know where you get your flour, but where I get mine, it don't come seasoned. So we season the meat with just salt and pepper. Now in the flour, this is going to brown in the pan, and we're going to dust the meat with the flour. So we want to season the flour. So what are we going to do for that? Well, we can use our kosher, sea salt, or even table salt if you want. I'm going to put in maybe a teaspoon of salt into the flour. Same thing I put in here. I'm also going to put in maybe 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And then I'm going to go over here. And one of my secrets that I like to put into almost everything, because it adds flavor, and if you don't use a lot of it, it won't be hot. I'm going to put in maybe 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. It just adds a little bit of flavor. And for those of you that say, oh, that's going to be hot, no. 1/4 teaspoon in the flour that you're going to dust the meat with, and then it's going to cook for an hour. All you're adding is flavor. You're not adding any heat. So take that and mix it up. There's 2 ways you can go about doing this. You can spread your meat out on the board, take your flour and dust it on like this. You don't want a heavy coating of flour on it because you're not frying it to create a coating. All you're trying to do is create essentially a roux in the pan. See, that piece is a little big, so I'll just take and cut it in half. You're essentially creating a roux by coating the meat with some flour. Or you can do which was the way I prefer to do it, which is throw the meat in the flour, dust it, shake it off, and then cook it in the pan, because it's going to cook in there with the meat while it tenderizes for a good 45 minutes to an hour. And that flour is going to brown with the meat, and then it's going to break down, and it's going to create the base of your sauce, which creates that nice, thick, velvety sauce that you want with your stroganoff. Now, you could do it on the stovetop. You could do this, and then once this step is complete, throw it in the oven for 1/2 hour, 45 minutes if you want at 350, and let it simmer in the oven with a lid on it. You could do it that way too. I prefer to do it on the stovetop. So again, you can spread it out like this and just dust it on the board and then throw it in the pan. I'm going to use this little bit of flour I have here, and most of it won't even get used. I'm going to do it in the pan. I use my light olive oil so much, and my bottle's empty, so I'm going to throw it in. I keep 2 types of olive oil. I keep extra virgin, and I keep the last press or light olive oil, which is what this is. Anytime I cook something long on the stove, I will use the last press, or it's called virgin, not extra virgin, olive oil, which is what this is. Now, if you don't have olive oil, or you don't want to use your extra virgin, because it is more expensive, you could use country crock for this. You could even use butter. Butter, if you do it with butter, you need to do it on a lower heat, because it will burn if you don't. If you put your butter in a pan and then you flour and put your meat in, it's going to burn. So you want to turn the temperature down before you put your meat in. And so it could sog a little bit instead of brown right away. So I wouldn't use butter, but country crock would work. I'm using the light olive oil for this. And so I'm just going to put in a good amount, actually. You see the pan's already hot. And so I'm going to take some of this, and I don't care if I'm not trying to fry it, again, remember. So my favorite method to do this is to take it and shake it in my hand, like that, and then just throw it in there. Take it, shake the flour off in my hands, like that, and then just throw it in there. And then I'll take some more, dump it in the flour, because that's all I'm really trying to do. And you want to actually kind of get that first batch or two in there kind of quickly, because you don't want that olive oil to burn. And you got that pan on hot. Once you put a little bit in there, it will cool the temperature of the pan. And the reason you're shaking that flour off is if you don't shake the flour off and you just throw it in there, the flour is going to burn in that olive oil. You do want to shake it off just like that. Throw it in there, spread it around. And you see how that flour shakes off onto the meat. You make like a little cage with your hands. Shake the excess flour off. Throw it in there. And then when you get down to the bottom, and you're going to get some flour, and that's okay. That's what you have a sponge or dish towel for, paper towels, all that sort of stuff. Throw it in there. And now, your cooks, chefs, all that, they're going to tell you that if you want to brown something, you're going to put half this much in to brown something. And that's true. And we're only trying to partially brown this. We want the flour to act as a roux over the course of our cooking. And so while I'm trying to get some browning to it, that is true. And you see I'm fishing out a couple of the pieces here, small pieces. Well, it's true, I want to brown some of it off. That's what it's doing right now on the one side. I'm more interested in the roux than I am the browning, because stroganoff is about taste and flavor. Look how much flour I have left. I barely used any of that because I shook most of it off. Okay. So while we're developing that first layer of browning and crust on that, I'll wash my hands. I'm done with the flour. As you can see, most of that flour goes to waste. And if you remember the amount of cayenne pepper I put in there, it's about a quarter of a teaspoon, and most of it is still in this bowl. So for those of you that say, I put in too much cayenne, no. In effect, there's really not very much in there. And for those of you who say I oversalted it, no, most of it's still in this bowl. Okay, so we're letting that brown off a little bit. Now, while that's starting to brown, I'm going to cut up these mushrooms. Now, again, most of the cooks you see on TV, they're going to say, wash this board, wash this board. No. That's for the kitchen police out there. They're going to tell you that you have to wash it because it's all contaminated. In fact, what it's got is a little bit of flour, some leftover meat. It's 2 minutes old. There's no salmonella on it, and it's still got seasoning left. So whatever I cut on this board is already in that pan, and whatever I put in there behind it is going to cook with it. So I'm going to cut up some mushrooms to go in there. But first, because I like garlic, I'm going to put some garlic in there too. Most people would say, well, why don't you put the garlic in first? Well, if you put garlic in hot oil, regardless of what kind of oil or butter it is, it's going to saute. And in about 30 seconds, maybe 60 if the temperature is down, it's going to start to brown. And 30 seconds after that, it'll start to burn. So in a hot pan of oil, if you add garlic and then try to flour your meat, you're going to burn your garlic. And nobody likes burnt garlic. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of garlic here while we're letting that brown. That way the garlic won't burn, but we're still going to get a nice garlic flavor. And remember, it's going to cook for a good 45 minutes to an hour anyway. So it's not going to be a strong garlic flavor. It's going to be a nice background, a hint of garlic. And again, remember, we're going to do it on the same board. So whatever seasonings were on the board are just going to go with the garlic. And now, if you want to do the garlic out of the jug, that's fine. Put in however much you want. Teaspoon, tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, whatever you want. In this case, I've got, looks like I got about 8 cloves of garlic here. And again, my preference is, I prefer the cleaver, because I'm used to it, nice and heavy. Go through and I'll just clean all this up. And you can make this as fine as you want. The bigger the pieces, you know, the more pronounced it'll be in the end result. The smaller the pieces, the more it'll cook into the sauce and you won't even know it's there. So if you like chunks of garlic, make them bigger. And if you don't want chunks of garlic, but you just want a little bit of the flavor, make them smaller. It's up to you, however you like it. If you don't like a lot of garlic, just put in 1 or 2. If you don't like any garlic, don't put any in. It's not going to hurt anything. Now that, and while I'm doing this, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, that meat's been in there 2 or 3 minutes. So that bottom side is probably brown now. It's probably a good time to go ahead and give it a turn. So I'll take my trusty spatula. And you see where they do that. I got some browning going on. And because there's so much meat in here, I'm not going to get the perfect brown. Once I start to turn it, it's going to glop up a little bit because of the amount of the flour that's in there. But you can see I'm already starting to get some fronds build up in the bottom here. So I'll give it a little turn. And remember, this is on high, so it's cooking away. I'll let it keep going here while I work on this garlic. We're just going to take our garlic, finish cleaning off the garlic paper, trim off any hard ends we might have. Get rid of that garlic paper, off that. Take it all, and again, since this is going to simmer like a stew for about 45 minutes, I could smash it right now, but with Stroganoff, because the flavor is going to permeate throughout. And again, I don't even have all the paper out of here. You could take it all out if you want. I'm going to just give it a nice kind of a chop first. Break it down just a little bit. I'm not going to smash it because I want little pieces of it in there. By the time it cooks down, you'll barely be able to taste it. So I'm going to give it, I want those little kind of like nuggets because they will caramelize with this meat while it's still browning. And again, remember what we talked about with the board. Whatever flavors I had on the board are mixing with that garlic right now. And I know the clean board police are going to be showing up saying, oh, it's against the rules. I say horse hockey to that because it's all fresh, it's all going in at the same time. So that's kind of like a nice rough chop. If there's any bigger pieces, you know, do it one more. One right there. Good. Good. Right in we go. We'll give it another stir. Let that garlic get to the bottom of the pan. You're going to smell that in a second. Oh, that smells nice. And again, that's still on high. And you can hear the sizzle's gone off a little bit, and that's because the temperature's come down on the pan since I turned it. Now I'll take my mushrooms. Now, if these are really dirty, I'm going to clean them. But they're not really, and these are little button mushrooms. You can use any mushroom you want here. These are the kind that you just find in the produce section. These aren't very dirty, they're pretty clean. If you find some dirt, brush it off. You don't have to wash them. Sometimes you'll find them with long stems, or they'll have and hard end on the end, just trim it off if you want, if you don't like that, but you don't need to. What I do is I try to make my mushrooms the same size as the piece of my meat. So if they're really small, like this one, I might leave it whole and throw it in that way, or I might just cut it in half and leave it that way. These are big enough for the most part to where I'll probably just quarter them. If you want, slice them, make them as thick as you want or as thin as you want. But by the time these cook down, they'll be a little bit smaller than the meat pieces. If they were a little bigger, I'd still quarter them. I could probably get away with just doing these in halves because they're kind of small. This one's a little bigger. So this one you should probably quarter like that. You see, quarter it. This one, half it. This one's big enough to quarter. And it only takes a second to go through. If you want to buy them pre-sliced, buy them pre-sliced. If that stem's too long for you, take the stem off. If you want to keep the stem, throw the stem in. Do it the way you want. Because they're going to cook down, and it's all about taste anyway. And these are going to be small enough by the time they've cooked down over an hour or so to where it's not really, you want the taste of the mushroom. Okay, and we're going to let these begin the deglazing process in the pan. And that's where we're going to get the mushroom taste. So you can see some of these I'm just doing in half. I'm not even doing it whole. That one I'll take the stem off. Because that's what you want. You want about, that's probably a cup and a half, 2 cups of mushrooms. Yeah, probably 2 cups. You could put more in. You could put less in. But you want that taste. So now, what I'm going to do with these is, that meat is almost brown. I'm just going to take them, throw them right over the top. Just like that. Right off my board. Put them in like that. They're going to release their own mushroom liquid or mushroom water or whatever you want to call it. And we're going to give it a stir in a second. When they hit the bottom of the pan, they'll start to cook. Now, if you want a little stronger flavor, add a nice red wine right now, about a half a cup. Or you could even add a cup, because right now you want to deglaze the pan. We're going to begin that by letting the mushrooms do it by releasing their liquid. We still, if you look, we still are building this font at the bottom of the pan, which is going to be, you see how, if you look, all that at the bottom of the pan, that's all our flavor for our sauce. And we still want it to continue to build. That's all the juice from the meat and that flour mixing at the bottom. Here, this is a great shot of it right here. You see those little pieces of garlic down in there. And when we give it a stir, you're going to see these mushrooms are going to mix in there. And we want those mushrooms to cook for a minute or two to release their juices too. And in fact, for the water to evaporate from them, because that's going to leave their flavor behind. So that's how we're building the flavors. Okay, so what do we got in there now? We got our seasoned flour, our seasoned meat, our mushrooms are in there, our garlic's in there. Is there anything else you want to add to layer your flavors? Now's the time to do it before you start to cook it down. We also have our last press olive oil. If you added extra virgin olive oil to cook it in, you'd have a little stronger olive oil taste in there right now. Or if you use butter or a country crock or margarine, you'd have that taste in there now. And you got to remember, these are all going to cook together for 45 minutes to an hour. So the flavors are going to all come together. That's how you get that really good stroganoff flavor. Remember, we'll add the sour cream later. We'll add a couple more seasonings towards the end of the cooking process to brighten it all up. And you can serve this over mashed potatoes, rice. I prefer pasta. So this time I'm going to use rigatoni. It's great over extra wide egg noodles, or bow tie noodles are great. Mix it up if you want. Right now I'm on a rigatoni kick because it holds pasta so well, so I'll do it with rigatoni. That's why I got my pasta pot going over here. In fact, I'll just turn that on and turn it on low to get it starting to warm. And for that, I use regular old table salt. A whole bunch of pasta water in there. I use a lid because it heats up faster, and I'll just throw in, see my hand's dirty too. I'll throw in about 2 tablespoons of salt, throw my lid on, turn it on low. In about 20 minutes that'll be warm. When I'm ready to cook my pasta in about 40 minutes, I can turn it on high and I'll be ready to go. Meanwhile, You can see those mushrooms have cooked down just a little bit now. You see that meat? Okay, so it's time to deglaze. We could let those mushrooms go a few more minutes if we want to let them go, but you can see how they cook down. So now we could add the red wine we talked about. I've got some nice Cabernet right here. Now, for my family, I don't put wine in because it strengthens, or what they call fortifies the flavor too much. Makes it a little too strong for the kids. So I'm just going to go with water. You could add, like I said, a half a cup or a cup of wine and then water. You could add beef stock if you want. Whatever you add to it is just going to add that flavor profile to it. Water is perfectly fine. You could put water in with some beef cubes if you want to just enhance it, but you don't need anything more. Here's 2 cups of water. What you have in here already is plenty of beef flavor. Now you want to cover this. So if I added the wine, I would stir it and give it about a minute for the alcohol to burn off. Then I would add water or beef stock. But in this case, this is plenty. So that's 2 cups of water. And I'm going to cover it just until all of the ingredients are just fairly covered. Because that's going to cook uncovered on a simmer. So now I still have it on high, if you notice. And so we're gonna give this a stir. And I'm using a wood. I always use wood. And you see what's coming up off the bottom? You see that? That's that font that formed on the bottom. And what we want is we want that to mix in with that water or stock or whatever we're putting in, which is going to form the sauce. And so I'm just giving it a gentle stir and a scrape at the same time. And I'm essentially washing the pan with this spatula and the water. And I'm gently moving it across there and feeling the bottom until I feel it smooth. And you see how all the meat and the mushrooms are getting washed. They've lost all the little pieces and bits that are on them. It's all falling off into the liquid I just put in there. And that's forming our sauce. And so we're just going to gently work this around. And I'm moving it around the sides to clean the sides of the pan too, because some of that font formed on the sides. And you see how that water is taking on a real deep dark color. I'll wash off my spatula in there as well. And the bottom feels almost smooth now. I can feel there's a little bit right there. And when it's smooth, that means all the font has been picked up. And it's now mixed into that water. And it's now no longer water. That's now our sauce. So there's the base of our stroganoff. So what we're going to do now is, and I can take it, clean it off the side there. And we're going to stir this every 10 to 15 minutes anyway. And you can see how everything is pretty much covered with the water. The mushrooms are floating. Those will cook down even more during the cooking process. They'll get a little smaller. We can leave that set right like that while I clean up. And by the time I'm done cleaning this up, it should come to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, we're going to reduce it to low and watch the clock for about 45 minutes. After about 45 minutes, the fibers in the meat will have broken down to where they're super tender, and that liquid will have reduced by about half. And at that point, we'll add some herbs to it. We can use dry or fresh, and then we're going to add some sour cream, and we're ready to serve. And it's really that simple. So that's the whole thing.